Hello everyone, my name is Patrick O'Grady and this is IELTS Hanoi. Thank you very much for joining me today. Today I think we've got a good lesson. We're going to be looking at 8 different tips and strategies and ideas in how to get ready for the IELTS test. So let's do it. So the first thing we're going to look at today is look at a comparison between the IELTS academic and IELTS general. So what the heck is the difference? Let's do it. There are 2 kinds of IELTS tests, the academic IELTS and the general IELTS. Let's take a look at what the differences are. The academic IELTS are for people who want to study at a university. They're also for some special jobs. I understand that if you're a doctor, you need to get an 8.0 or better. So that's what the academic IELTS is for. For the general IELTS, it's more for immigration. The listening and speaking are exactly the same for both the academic and general. So you're going to need to study the same for both of those. So for the reading, the questions are going to be the same for both, the types of questions will be the same for both the academic and the general. However, the texts will be different. The academic texts will be about academic subjects, and the general texts will be about everyday life. So for the writing, it's also a little bit confusing. For academic writing, you will be asked to write about some graphs and charts and make a comparison of those. In the general writing, you'll be asked to write a letter to an English-speaking person. Task 2 happens to be the same for both general and academic, so you need to study the same thing for that. So the second thing I want to talk about today is the test format. The first part of the test is the listening test. Let's go over that. The listening test lasts for 30 minutes. So you'll be doing your test for 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, you'll have 10 minutes to transfer your answers from the test to the answer sheet. That's listening. The next is reading. The reading is broken into 3 passages, 3 different readings. Each one gets progressively more difficult. You've got 1 hour to do this exercise. And the important thing to remember about this is that you're not given any extra time to transfer your answers from the answer sheet from the test to the answer sheet. So give yourself a little bit of extra time to transfer those answers. The third part of the test is writing. And what can I tell you about writing? Well, it's broken into 2 tasks, and the first task, you should give yourself about 20 minutes to finish it. That time will be broken up specially. You want to give yourself about 2 or 3 minutes to think about what you're going to write and spend another 15 minutes writing, and then give yourself another 2 or 3 minutes to review what you've written. So that's part 1, that's task 1. Move on to task 2. Task 2, you've got about 40 minutes. In this part of the test, you'll be given 1 thing to talk about and to write about, and you've got about 40 minutes. Again, you're going to give yourself about 3 minutes at the beginning of the task. Think about what you're going to write it down, organize your ideas. Then you've got some time to do your writing, and make sure you give yourself a couple of minutes at the end to review your writing and fix it. This is really important, that spending some time at the end of your writing to think about what you've done. I can tell you, every time I write in English, I make a mistake. There's always a little something, and I take some time and review it, and I always find something. So I think maybe you're not quite perfect, and it's a good thing to take home. And now we move on to the fourth and last part of the test, which is speaking. The speaking test is broken into 3 different parts. Part 1 will last about 4 or 5 minutes, and you'll be asked some general questions about yourself, your family, where you're from, and it all should be quite easy and for you, and so no problems there. Part 2, you'll be given a task sheet, a pencil, and a paper. You'll also be given 1 minute to think about your answer and to write some notes. That minute is really important in organizing your ideas, so make sure you use it wisely, and we'll be covering a lot of that in our course. And the third thing I'd like to talk to you today about is setting realistic goals. So what does that mean? Sometimes students will come to me at a very low level and they'll say, I want to get a 6.5 in 1 month. And sometimes it's just impossible to do it in such a short time span. So let me talk a little bit about levels, and if you want to know your level, we can help you out. We can give you a placement test and very quickly find out where you are. But in the meantime, let me explain a little bit about levels. There's something called the Common European Framework, CEF, and what it is it's a leveling system. So when everyone learns a new language, they're going to start at an A1 level. So what does that mean? Well, it's 0. You've got almost nothing, and it takes about 75 to 100 hours to move from an A1 level to an A2 level. Now, here's the funny thing. When we move to a new level, it takes a lot more time to move up. When we're at an A2 level, we're going to be looking about 150 hours of study to get enough education, get enough in your head to move up to the next level. The next level is B1. And it gets that much more difficult. You're going to need about 400 hours of study. Okay, it's a lot of study to move up. And then we go on to B2, and we're looking at about 600 hours of study. So it's a long time. So one of the things we're going to work with you a lot is how to do self-study, because there's no way you can do that working in a class. It would just be impossible. So we've got a number of different interesting and exciting ways you can study at home, and that's setting realistic goals. And so, to be realistic, if you are starting at an A1 level and you wanted to get to a B2 level, it's about a 6.0 on the IELTS, you're going to need to give yourself some time. I would give yourself at least 6 months to move your way up. So be realistic. And again, if you are starting at above an A1 level, great, it's less time to study, so good for you. And the fourth thing I'd like to talk to you today about is marking criteria. So there's 2 things we have to talk about, which is speaking and writing. First, let's talk about speaking. Speaking is broken into 4 different criteria. Each one is weighted equally at 25%. The first thing to worry about, think about maybe, is fluency and coherence. And that's how well you're speaking. Are you speaking smoothly? Are there any noticeable pauses? Even I do it naturally. Everyone uhs a lot. I shouldn't say a lot. Everyone uhs, but try to minimize that as much as you can for the fluency score. And the second thing you're marked on are your lexical resources, specifically your lexical resources in vocabulary. What's going to give you a good score is using words that are above the simple level. You don't want to use big and small. Huge and tiny, much better. You don't want to use the word like. get rid of like. I enjoy, I'm fond of, I'm keen on, I adore are much better words to use than the word like. So, and if you mix up your vocabulary nicely, your score for vocabulary will go up for sure. The third criteria that you'll be marked on are lexical resources, grammar. And what does that mean? It means using your tenses correctly. It means using grammar correctly as best you can. But one thing you want to be careful about or try to use a lot are using compound and complex sentences. Something the examiners are looking for. They really don't want you to use simple sentences. And using a wide range of grammar here will really help your score for lexical resources, grammar. The fourth thing I'd like to talk to you about is pronunciation. And that is, again, that's weighted at 25% as the others are. Pronunciation is pretty straightforward. You probably know what it's about. The big problem with Vietnamese, and I've said this a million times, I'll probably say it a million more, are your final sounds. The final consonants of words are a real struggle for most Vietnamese. And if you could fix this mistake, foreigners will have a much easier time understanding you. So if there's one thing you could focus on for pronunciation, watch those final sounds. They're really tough. Right. Now, the second part of understanding the marking criteria is understanding the writing. So the writing for task 1 and task 2 are marked slightly differently. We'll be getting into that in more detail in future videos. But for today, I want you to understand the 4 criteria that you will be marked on for your writing. The first criteria is task achievement. Do you answer the question that is asked? And if you answer it well, you're going to do well on that. The second criteria that you'll be marked on is coherence and cohesion. Does the paper that you've written work well together? And we have a number of very interesting tasks, a lot of fun, to help you put your ideas together so it makes sense to the examiner. The third criteria that you'll be marked on is lexical resources. This is more vocabulary. So we're going to really try to wow our examiner with good vocabulary. And the fourth criteria that you'll be marked on is your grammar range and accuracy. Again, that's using your right tenses, using your grammar correctly, using those compound and complex sentences, and you're going to do great. The final thing I want to tell you about the marking criteria is an attachment we've put below. The attachment is from the British Council, and it gives very clear directions or instructions what the examiners are looking for. So please take a look at that and try to understand what the examiner is looking for, and I'm sure it will help you with your score. The fifth thing I'd like to talk to you about today is understanding the different types of questions you might come in contact to in your IELTS for your reading and your listening. There are over 10 different questions you might get in your reading and listening, and you really need to prep for that before you get into the test. You don't want to be wasting time reading the instructions during the test. It's also important to note that the IELTS test will do some really simple things to trick you, and it's very important. You're being tested on your ability to read instructions, so make sure you get those straight. So make sure you understand these questions. Our course can help you develop the skills you need to help you answer these questions easily. And the sixth thing I want to talk to you today about is perfecting your IELTS skills. Now, what the heck does that mean? Well, it's kind of tough. Do you know how to quickly find information in a reading text? There's a few tricks and tips that we can help you with that. Do you know how to make your speaking test coherent and how to draw out your answers so you can make 2 minutes? It's a tough one. Or do you know how to write an effective introduction or conclusion for your writing tasks? These are all skills that we're going to be looking at very closely in our course, and I hope you can join us. And the 7th thing I'd like to talk to you about today is improving your vocabulary. Vocabulary is super huge. It's 25% of your mark for your speaking and your writing, and it'll definitely come into play with your listening and your reading. So how do we develop our vocabulary skills? One thing you should think about is, again, be realistic. Can you guess what the average, how many words the average person learns in one day? How many new words a person can learn in one day? Only 4. Only 4 words a day. So don't beat yourself up if you're not learning super fast. If you get 2 or 3 words a day, you're doing great. So how can we develop our vocabulary? One of the best ways to do it is to read, okay? What I would recommend to you is read something you enjoy. The texts for IELTS are kind of boring. They're not fun. It's a great way to study and learn academic vocabulary. That's fun, that's great, but maybe it's a little boring. Maybe you could read something that you find interesting. Maybe you're interested in boxing or something fun like that. Maybe you could try reading that, and when you find a word that's difficult, look it up in the dictionary and write it down. You're going to need to get yourself a journal, and which is actually something we're working on here at IELTS Hanoi. We're putting together a special app for vocabulary, but we'll talk about that later. So write it down in a journal and work on it, and come back to that journal, look it up again, and you will find over time these words will start clicking. So develop your vocab. And the 8th and final subject we're going to talk about today in getting yourself ready for the IELTS is to practice every day. Now, I know a lot of people out there are saying, "Oh man, I can't study anymore. My time is full. I'm done." What I'd like to challenge you to do is just try 10 minutes every day. And there's lots of different things we can do, but how about this? I think this is a really fun idea. Your friend probably wants to study English as well. How about this? Get on your phone them up, and say hi, and talk to them in English for 10 minutes. How about that for a challenge? So there you go. I want you to practice your English every day. Thanks, guys. Great. So those are my 8 different ways to get yourself ready for the IELTS test. I wish you the best of luck in your studies. I know you can do it. Let's get out there and start today.